I always wonder, the female puppet, where do those slug monsters keep coming from?
Rarely will a prequel kind of outshine the original, but I feel like in this case, it really does.
She's really super adorable in this because she's like at a carnival getting her fortune read and basically deciding that the guy who's with her is kind of beneath her. It's very cute.
He is.
Well, it's playtime this time out on the Fright Club podcast. We're going to play with our dolls. Creepy-ass dolls. I think we have that book somewhere. No, that's a great book, by the way. Creepy-ass dolls. These dogs are creepy. Welcome. This is the Fright Club podcast, and she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
Talking about creepy dolls, our favorite creepy dolls in horror, and it should be fun. We've got a special guest, but we're also talking about the great response we got last week when we started. It was part one of our look at our favorite side characters that we think deserve their own movies, and we just did the ladies last time, and it went over pretty well.
It did. And it's a fun topic, though, so I wasn't super surprised that people liked it. Omar thinks that Mrs. Baylock from The Omen, her standalone film should be about her working as a substitute teacher.
Yeah, I don't think too many people would be acting up
no.
when Mrs. Baylock is in charge.
And when we did ours, you and I talked about, you I think in particular, you were just curious who could possibly play a young Minnie Castevet if we were to do, we talked about doing the Roman and Minnie Castevet early years.
Yeah.
And Nathan thought Sarah Silverman would be a good, I like that.
Other than, and it's not a big thing, other than the physical size difference. I mean, Ruth Gordon, obviously a pretty small human.
Right.
But I think that's I could definitely see her doing that. She could get her voice probably very similar, and with the attitude, that could work.
Yeah, I think so too. And then Andrew agreed with us that Tangina, she needs a whole series. She needs like her own sort of the Conjuring series, the Tangina Files.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Total sense. I love it all.
Yeah. Speaking of Andrew, we just wanted to thank him again. He had us on his Freaks and Psychos podcast, and we talked about the movie Relic and about dementia and horror, and it was just a great time. Such a good show. So you guys should check that out.
Yeah, that was different because that was a deep dive. I mean, he gets into it, and I love it. Every podcast has their own thing. We try to make ours a little more, a little more streamlined, a little more brief, but he really digs deep, and he does a great job at it. And we're glad to be a part of it. It came out really well.
It did. And another one, and this is not horror, but it is another one that we were lucky enough to guest on, and another one that digs deep. I mean, they go scene by scene. They're called Trash Watch. And it's just a fun group. It's a funny podcast. And they had us on to talk about Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping, which we had a great time. I want to thank them for having us on, too.
Yeah, you can check that out. That was fun. So that was what's happened in the last few weeks. We do have some exciting news about what may be coming up or what is coming up in the next several weeks. But we'll get to that a little bit later. We got some creepy-ass dolls to talk about, and anything other than being creepy and being ass and being a doll. Anything else that qualifies you for this podcast?
Well, they're not all, strictly speaking, dolls. We gave the okay to puppets and mannequins, that kind of a thing. As long as you are inanimate and have a face.
Okay. And how did this come about? Was this our special guest idea?
It kind of was, actually, because we have been kicking around doll houses because Katie, Pina Joe, she requested doll houses, and our special guest reached out and said, well, what about dolls? Like, have you done anything on dolls yet? And I said, well, I know, Phantom Dark Dave, we haven't. Do you want to come on and talk about dolls? And he said, yes. Hi, Dave.
What's up, Fright Club?
It's a good idea from doll houses, which we will do at some point, but we might as well start with the dolls first.
And with that being said, the only other golden rule we had was that we were focusing on the film. It had to be relevant to the doll being a part of the film, but we weren't concentrating necessarily on the doll as an individual character, because that could be a totally different list.
Yeah, exactly. All right. That's fair. That's good to know. And I wanted to somehow include my Steve Austin's $6 Million Man doll when I was a kid, but I guess it doesn't really qualify.
It does not. No. And I'm sorry we have that.
That's probably worth a ton of money now.
Let's sell it.
I wish I had that. No, I don't have it anymore. I wish I had that. I wish I had the Evel Knievel thing too, but we've gone over that. Anyway, we're talking about the creepy ass dolls, and as long as they have a face, they qualify. So what gave you this idea, Dave? It was just talking about the doll houses?
Well, as you guys know, I've been a long-time listener, huge fan of the Fright Club.
Thank you.
And I was going through a lot of the resume, and I'm like, you get to that point where you guys come up with an idea that most folks never come up with, like toilet horror and things of that nature. And I'm like, what about dolls? Like the simplicity of, have you talked about dolls? And it just seemed like that hadn't been brought up too much, and I thought it'd be really cool, and I'm a fan, so here we are.
Well, thank you. Yes, that more evidence that we go for highbrow, right? Toilet horror. Who else is going to care enough to do toilet horror? No, it's one of those that seems like we should have done by now.
It is. Yeah, I'm actually really surprised we haven't done dolls before.
Because a lot of people are scared of dolls. Mm-hmm. And I know there's one on this list where I remember as being a kid that the trailer itself caused all kinds of headlines because it scared everybody. But we'll get to that. We've got two lists that sort of overlap a little bit.
We do. And so sometimes we'll go 5-5-4-4, but this time what we're going to do is just let Dave kick it off and run us through his top couple, and that's when we will jump in.
Okay, yeah, that's when we've got the overlap. All right, that's fine. So, Dave, why don't you start us off with your number 5 most creepy, horrific doll?
Ironically, it's called Dolls from 1987.
I'm a doll maker. I make the most wonderful toys. Dolls, puppets, soldiers, ballerinas. Nobody wants a doll that's special anymore, that's one of a kind.
A movie that is produced by Charles Band, written by Ed Naha, who did things like Troll and Bud the Chud, but got his fame from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and directed by the late and great Stuart Gordon, which everybody who listens to your podcast knows who that is, and even features Stuart Gordon's wife, Carolyn Purdy Gordon. The reason that this movie makes my list isn't because it's a overall great movie, but the effects for the time period are remarkable. So much so that this movie spent an extra year in production just because it had to deal with things like puppets, marionettes, stop motion animation, animatronics. Like Charles Brand, he brought everything to the list. And this movie, it wasn't the first movie to use killer doll, but I think it was the first to use this amount of killer dolls.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, and then the different types of dolls. I thought that was really an impressive element to this one, and it has that kind of. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely cheesy and very, very 80s, but it has that sort of particular brand of cheesy 80s that Stuart Gordon brought to stuff like Reanimator and the rest of his films. I mean, it does have a really nostalgic quality, I think, to it.
It does, and it has such an awesome setting. Just anytime you can get locked up in an old kind of creepy gothic Hammer horror style mansion, you're in for a good time.
Yeah, no, exactly. You're exactly right there.
Okay, that's a good one. Good start from 1987. Just Dolls from Stuart Gordon. All right, moving up to, you're about the same time period here with number 4, late 80s, right?
Right, a movie that was actually inspired by Dolls from 1989, the original Puppet Master.
They have given life to a deadly power.
We're all in danger.
And now a box of little toys
I think someone's in the room, Frank.
has become a gang of little terrors. Irene Miracle, Paul Lamont, Barbara Crampton, and William Hickey as...
You are blood of my blood.
The Puppet Master.
The same year that Louis from Christmas Vacation, he's in this movie. He plays Andre Toulon, who is a puppet maker. It's William Hickey in his perfect voice.
Oh, yeah. We probably mentioned him when we talk about voices in horror sometime because he's one of those guys that when you hear the voice, it's like no one else. That's who that is. That's William Hickey. It's great.
And he has a lot of movies to his credit, too. But this movie in particular, the reason it makes number 4 and kind of just it climbs above Dolls is something that you mentioned, Hope, about the different types of dolls. But where I felt this movie, all the dolls had their own each and individual personality.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's funny, both of these films were on my short list, and I had Puppet Master just above Dolls for the same reason. I thought that, and I thought that the individual puppets were more interesting. And, everybody has their favorite of the puppets, but I always wonder, the female puppet, how does she get those? Where do those slug monsters keep coming from? Like, how did they get inside her to start with? But that's always the grossest thing. She starts off with these sort of kissy noises, then you look over and she's just out this giant slug. It was really disturbing.
Yeah, she basically regurgitates leeches, and she's actually, it's oddly enough, my favorite doll out of all of them.
Oh, yeah, mine too.
And, the main doll in this movie is Blade, who's so iconic to be on every single cover, because this franchise has 13 sequels somehow. But did you know that Blade was based on an actor that you guys love, Klaus Kinski?
I did not know that, and now that you say it, I can definitely see that. That's hysterical.
And then we should mention, too, this also features a cameo from our new friend, Barbara Crampton.
That's right. That's right. And she's really super adorable in this because she's like at a carnival getting her fortune read and basically deciding that the guy who's with her is kind of beneath her. It's very cute.
He is. That's a good one from 1989. Dave's number 4 is the iconic Puppet Master. So we get a little closer, get a little more recent for your number 3.
That's right. Everybody knew this was going to happen. We're going to dive into the Conjuring franchise with Annabelle Creation.
Your sister is coming after me.
Who?
The evil presence. It's because I'm the weakest.
It's the doll. The devil. Annabelle?
This movie is the 4th installment in the Conjuring franchise, and rarely will a prequel kind of outshine the original, but I feel like in this case, it really does. I'm such a sucker for these kind of movies, and I really pay attention to the atmosphere, and what's more like scarier than just kind of an isolated farmhouse surrounded by a whole bunch of creepy things.
Orphans. That's I think, this movie was one that I really expected to first of all, it's far and away a better, scarier movie than Annabelle. Annabelle was pretty lackluster, really, I thought, and they had a good spark of something with what they did in the first Conjuring film when they introduced this doll. I just don't think that the first Annabelle movie really did much with it. I wanted to like the second one. There were some creepy moments to it. It fell apart for me a little bit with the nun and the Catholic business not really working out.
A little bit. You practically were throwing things at the screen when we saw it. A little bit.
But there are some really creepy things. Although I have to say that if if you're a doll maker and your daughter was possessed by a demon, and now your wife can't ever leave her bedroom because her eyes have been clawed out by Demon Doll, but the doll is somewhere chained up in your house. Why do you think to yourself, we should let orphans live here?
Well, this is a good example of what a smart choice it was to not make, because anybody that has spent some time with this franchise probably knows that the real Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll, not very scary looking. So they redesigned it and got this creepy ass Annabelle. And we found out when we got to spend time with, one of the Annabelle recreations, that people, especially, man, if you have it in your house, if you have it in your car, if you have it in your person, they don't want anything to do with you.
No, they freak right the fuck out.
I mean,
I still have that picture of you guys saved when you were posing with the Annabelle doll.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, look, these are my friends.
Yeah. And
That's awesome.
And when we told people, no, we took it home and we kept it in our house and overnight. And people were like, you did not. Yes, we did.
We posed her all over the place and
We
took
did.
pictures and sent them to my sisters.
Yeah. She's a sweetheart. But no, but it's a great look and a creepy doll. And yeah, I agree with you about this one being scarier, creepier, and overall the feel of it, regardless of the Catholic stuff, is better than the first Annabelle. We think it got better as it went on from there, but that's jumping ahead a little bit. So Annabelle Creation, number 3 on Dave's list of creepy dolls from 2017. Okay, so now we'll start getting into our list a little bit because this is where we have some nice overlap. So Our number 5 is actually number 2 on Dave's list. And this is from 2007. It's a young widower returning to his hometown to search for answers to his wife's murder, which may be linked to the ghost of a deceased ventriloquist. It's Dead Silence.
What an underrated gem. I believe that so often when James Wan is brought up in conversation, it's either Saw or Insidious or The Conjuring, and Dead Silence is a love letter to classic horror films.
Well, unfortunately, the Dead Silence was the reaction from the audience when it came out because it was such a flop. They had plans to, hope to do at least one sequel, and they were quickly abandoned because nobody went to see this pretty much.
And that is kind of too bad. I mean, I think that they had something going here. Ventriloquist dolls are creepy. Ventriloquists are creepy. And I think they had one of the things that I think they did really nicely was kind of paying homage with the different, because Mary Shaw, she had 101 dolls. So when you sort of pan those dolls, you get all of the looks, Toy Story 4, that creepy looking doll from Toy Story 4 from Goosebumps out, that sort of classic tuxedo to gentleman. They have this awesome clown at the end, very similar to the doll in Poltergeist, the clown doll in Poltergeist. And they have the doll, the clown actually has like the jigsaw circle spiral, on its head. So they give a lot of nice nods to this type of horror throughout the whole genre. And also Mary Shaw is played by Judith Roberts, who was the beauty across the hall in Eraserhead. So,
Nice.
Got a tender in my heart for her.
Yeah, but apparently Lee Whannell was so unhappy with the way the movie turned out because of all the people from the studio sticking their fingers in. He decided from then on to write all future scripts on spec as opposed to pitching the idea to the studio and then being paid to write the screenplay, which is what happened here. So, yeah, he was none too happy. So maybe who knows, maybe that's part of the reason it didn't pan out as a box office hit, maybe because it wasn't quite the vision that he really wanted when he signed up for it.
One of the things I find really interesting about this movie is the Donnie Wahlberg character. He plays this very sort of Columbo-esque detective, and it's so out of step with the rest of the movie. I mean, he's this comic element in this sort of trench coat, and he says all these weird things, and it's entertaining, but it's just so not in keeping with the rest of the tone of the film. It always throws me.
What is it about the Wahlbergs and their natural ability to always play a cop or detective? It's always believable. I know I showed this movie to Julie last night, and I'm actually thankful that Donnie Wahlberg was in this movie being awkward and being the Columbo character that you mentioned, because otherwise this movie would have scared her to death.
You know what was cool, though? The year that came out, 2007, it was turned into one of the haunted houses at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights that year in Florida, which we went to, I don't know how many years ago, 5 or 6. And if you get the chance to go, it's really cool. I really enjoyed that.
It is really cool. And I can see where, because they take you to that. There's sort of this, you have to take a canoe to get there, which makes it seem like it wouldn't have been a very good amusement park at the time. But there was this big haunted house where Mary Shaw lived that at one point had been her theater. And that I can see that being turned into a very cool haunted house.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So number 5 on our list, number 2 for Dave, it's Dead Silence from 2007. Moving up to number 4. This is number 4 on our list of creepy, horrific dolls from 1988. Isolated by his strange parents, Leon finds solace in an imaginary friend, which happens to be an anatomy doll from his father's doctor's office. Unfortunately, the doll begins to take over Leon's life and his sister's as well. This is Pin.
If you want to get closer to Leon, you'll have to take care of Pin before Pin takes care of you. Is Pin a friend?
No. Oh, please.
Or an enemy? Only Leon knows.
What have you done? What have you done? What am I gonna do?
Pin. Some friendships die hard.
Dude, how weird is this movie? Very. It's a very weird movie.
Very.
And Pin is their best friend and sort of their babysitter and also anatomically correct. And that's an unusual choice to make with small children. I mean, that's going to cause some sort of effect, and it really screwed up Leon in a massive, massive way. This movie is so just odd. It's so unusual. And it's funny because the movie that years later I saw the movie The Pit, which could also easily be on this list. And it's about a disturbed blonde young Canadian boy whose teddy bear, one of those really beat up sort of carnival teddy bears, he thinks is telling him to feed his babysitters to these monsters who are in the pit in the backyard or out in the woods. It's a much more confused film because there's the teddy bear, but there's also a pit full of monsters in the backyard. It gets very sort of off the rails, but I love Pin. I love how weird it is. I love the bizarre directions that it takes. I love Leon's performance. David Hewlett plays Leon. And then Terry O'Quinn, the stepfather, he, of course, is the dad who is of no help to anyone ever. It's just the weirdest movie, and I definitely think not enough people have seen it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that you mentioned David Hewlett. The movie that Leon and Marcia see while on their date is Scanners. And then he went on later to star in Scanners 2, The New Order.
You guys know what I love about your podcast more than anything else? You've never ceased to amaze me with movies I had never discovered before. And so I never even heard of this movie until it was on your list. And I looked it up and I was like, The Stepfather's in it? And I'm actually a fan of David Hewlett because I used to watch Stargate Atlantis back when it aired on TV. And so diving into it, you're also telling me that this movie has a script written by the same guy that wrote the script for Amityville Horror in 1979.
Yeah.
Sign me up, please.
And it's got that trope that a lot of movies and horror movies have done, the loner, the awkward guy. They kind of did that in Ben and Willard, that needs a friend, and then the friend takes them down some dark paths.
Yeah, it's usually sort of this, an animation of their id. And we'll actually get into that in a lot of the other films here. The dolls in these movies, especially ventriloquist dolls, that's what they tend to represent for these twisted characters. Yeah, I think Leon is one of the greats in terms of that particular type of character.
I think you're right, though, Dave, even though this is, it's 1988, so late 80s, not an ancient movie, but I think this is one that has slipped through the cracks for a lot of people.
It did, because it didn't go to theater.
No, not here anyway. I mean, it's a Canadian film, and but no, I mean, it's one that I don't even know how I've heard of it. I don't even know why I know this movie, but I love it.
Maybe you should do some long, hard thinking about that. No, it's a good one. I appreciate that comment, Dave, because I think that's one that we've heard before and is very gratifying, I think, especially to you, because you're the one that picks these, that finds these movies that people haven't heard of before and maybe want to go out and check out now.
Yeah, that is actually one of my favorite things to do. So thanks for telling us, Dave.
I'll tell you guys one thing. If you want to watch this movie, you're going to have to find it quick because you can not rent it in many places. And if you want to buy it, this movie is such a cult classic that it's expensive. I was checking out VHS, DVD, and Laserdisc of all things prices, and you can't score this thing cheaper than $50 to $75.
Wow.
Yikes.
And it's going to go up even more now that we mentioned it. Pin from 1988, number 4 on our creepy doll list. Moving up to number 3. We're back to the Conjuring universe. While babysitting the daughter of Ed and Lorraine Warren, a teenager and her friend unknowingly awaken an evil spirit trapped in a doll. This is 2019's Annabelle Comes Home.
What did you do? I let her out. Who? Annabelle. I'm sorry. What else did you touch? Everything.
Can I play with Annabelle?
I think you have the wrong house. There's no Annabelle here.
Yes, she is.
I sometimes see things. Like how my mom sees things.
The doll, it's a beacon for other spirits.
This is the 7th in the Conjuring universe, 3rd movie in the Annabelle film series, and at least for me, I think you agree. We thought this was the most fun of the Annabelles. Scary enough, but had a great vibe. It moved quickly, and I had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, I think for me, too, the scariest single scene in any of the Annabelle films is in this one, even though it's not really that particularly scary of a film, but it's when Ed and Lorraine, of course, their car breaks down directly next to a big old cemetery where all of the fog is rolling out, and then Annabelle is in the back seat, and Lorraine just hear people say, "I like your doll." There's nobody's. I think it is my favorite scene in any of the Annabelle films. It's just so old school and creepy. And then what I love about the movie is that it's such a haunted house film. It's like every room in the house is haunted by something else, and there's something else that's fun going on. And also what I like about it, besides McKenna Grace, who plays Judith, and is Judy. It is just, she's such a really, really good performer in everything she's in. I thought she really elevated this film. But the film is so forgiving of all of the characters. You don't hate anybody. You hope everybody gets out okay. And I love that. Right.
And that's really well done, especially when it comes to the friend who ends up letting Annabelle out, because it's really set up for you to hate her. I mean, she comes over and just ignores all the warnings and, sets everything in motion. But the script does a good job of making you feel for her and you don't hate her. So, yeah, I agree. And I think especially the scenes, the set pieces with the friend inside this spooky room are really done well, as far as things that she's seeing like on the screen that aren't really happening yet, and things that are moving without anyone moving them. I think the scenes in there are really done well too, and it's got some nice tense tension to it and some comedy relief with that boy that comes over. He's a goof.
And the pizza guy.
This is such a cool movie. It was so hard for me to really navigate which Annabelle movie that I wanted on my list, and I was really relieved when I saw that this one was on your list, because that means that we get to talk about both of these movies. And just like you guys said, this is a fun movie. It has a little bit of everything, and I especially love how when we go down into that locked room that we kind of get more further exploration of all these items that we really haven't focused on so much before. And what's with that color wheel? I think is awesome.
Yes, it is awesome. No, you're right. I mean, that room is so cool. And, who knows how many of those items are consistent across all of the Conjuring films, but some of them are. I mean, you've seen some of them before, and then all of a sudden they have a personality and a ghost behind them, and it was so much fun.
This movie breaks one of my biggest rules in horror, and it's a personal rule. And Hope, I don't know, I think maybe you've even talked about this before when you guys talked about The Grudge, but when you're in bed under your covers, that's supposed to be like the safe zone. So I knew whenever we saw this in theater opening night, whenever she's in the bed and we kind of, the color wheel is going and we hear creepy noises, she starts to look under the covers. I was like, no way. That's the safe zone. This isn't happening. And sure enough, it does.
It's not fair.
And I remember, I think we talked about this right after we saw it, was the fact that we were so surprised it was rated R, because of the age of the characters involved might attract maybe a younger and wider audience. But apparently the filmmakers, especially the director, Gary Dauberman, and this was his debut, I believe, as a director, thought that rated R was what the audience expected from this universe, and would be disappointed if it wasn't. But really, I think it's just one F-bomb is really the only thing that qualifies it, really, for being R.
Well, I mean, they probably call it just for pervasive terror. It is pretty, there's a lot of scary stuff. But I agree with you. I mean, I don't come away from that movie thinking to myself, I saw an R-rated movie, because kids are young. It's fairly wholesome, really.
And we've got the next edition, it'll be the 10th film, right, in the Conjuring universe. The Devil Made Me Do It. That's coming later this year. Is that right?
Fingers crossed.
All right. So we'll see what that's rated and how that turns out. From the files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And get on it, Tangina. You could be the next one up. So that's our number 3, Annabelle Comes Home from 2019 on our list of creepy-ass dolls in horror. Moving up to our number 2 before we agree on number 1. And I remember this one very well back when I was a kid. This is from 1978. A ventriloquist is at the mercy of his vicious dummy while he tries to renew a romance with his high school sweetheart. It's magic.
You do magic too?
Corky does magic. I only do tricks.
There's never been a magician like him. How long you been like this, kid?
You never really told why you were here.
Hiding. Wasn't that cheap in New York?
You want success, but you're afraid of it.
I was afraid of success, like you said. I needed to get my head on straight.
And now you're fine?
Sure, on account of Peg. I've known her ever since high school. I never figured I'd have a chance with her.
Peg Jens, no, please, let me follow wherever you go.
Oh, please, don't kill her. No, I can't do it! I won't do it! You can't make me!
This is the one that I remember the trailer just setting off a lot of angry parents. You'd hear this on the news because you had a creepy doll face. They used the ventriloquist doll Fats in the ad and just made it really, really creepy. And a lot of people just complained that was going to scare kids about the doll, which, of course, only gave the movie more free publicity.
And I'm sure it did probably scare kids. I mean, I imagine it did. I also love that the doll's name is Fats, but the guy's name is Corky. Because I think, like, the whole time growing up, I thought the doll was named Corky for some reason in my head, because it's not a normal name for a man. It's a normal name for a doll. I apologize to anybody named Corky. Movies that came out in the 70s, horror films that came out in the 70s, sometimes call me. Richard Attenborough directed this and then directed Gandhi next. It just is so funny to me. William Goldman, who wrote All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Princess Bride, wrote this movie about a creepy ventriloquist doll.
Well, I think because a lot of more maybe back then with the studios were wheeling and dealing with some of these offers and who got to do what. But I think Richard Attenborough directed this or as a favor. He said, if I get Gandhi, I will do this for you. I think it was one of those deals. Huh. One for me, one for you deal.
Yeah. And then, of course, Anthony Hopkins is the star as Corky, who gets to date Anne Margaret, who I'm sure was everybody's dream girl at the time. And then Burgess Meredith. That's the other one. I love the Burgess Meredith kill in this movie. I love him in this movie. I love when Burgess Meredith is in horror films anyway. He should have done many, many more. I loved him in The Sentinel. He was my favorite thing in The Sentinel.
Yeah, because he almost has a William Hickey voice. It's close. You know?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's a little weird in the way he says things, like when he's talking to Corky, and you're telling me you're all right now?
Yeah, it's cartoonish a little bit. Yeah, I mean, this movie is dumb. Sorry, but it, a lot of these movies are dumb. I mean, that's the funniest thing I think about all of these films, about doll horror generally, is that there is something inherently creepy about these dolls, but it only carries a film so far. Eventually, it just sort of intersects with absurdism. It's absurd that we're afraid of these small things that are inanimate, whether they actually aren't, like Puppet Master, they are actually moving about on their own with leeches in their bellies, or whether they are, in fact, just killing you because there is a sick person who is killing you by way of the doll. Either way, there's a silliness and an absurdity about it that I think makes them a little more memorable.
Well, and one of the things for this movie specifically is that the movie never really tells you just what is going on. Is it the fact that Corky is schizophrenic and acting out these things through Fats, or is Fats actually possessed? And part of that is because there's a quick scene in the movie where Fats his eyes move without Corky being around. And they explained, they made a behind the scenes short that they included in the DVD in 2006. And they explained that was just a mistake. And Richard Attenborough liked the way it looked, and he left it in. But a little mistake like that brings up all sorts of fan theories.
Well, plus there is a last. I mean, I always hate think I'm giving away a spoiler for a movie that's almost 50 years old now. But there's a last scene in the entire film. The last voice you hear suggests that maybe Corky wasn't just a ventriloquist doll.
And we'll leave it at that.
This is another movie that you guys brought to my attention, and I'm ashamed to say I hadn't seen it until it was on your list, but it's one that I was always aware of. I remember back when Blockbuster Video was a thing. Remember that? I was in the store and they had it for sale back on VHS, and I did not pick it up for whatever reason. I think mostly because at that point, I hadn't realized the thing that you guys said a couple of shows ago, where you're like, how many horror movies is Anthony Hopkins in? I didn't realize it was a horror movie.
And it's no surprise when looking at the trailer that they specifically designed the doll to look like him, because it does. And he, of course, being Anthony Hopkins, he trained as a ventriloquist at the time, and he took the doll home to work with it, but apparently he got very freaked out by having that doll in his house, and he called his consulting ventriloquist in the middle of the night, threatening to throw it into the canyon if someone didn't come and pick him up immediately. And another interesting thing about the casting of Anthony Hopkins, years later, a story came out that Gene Wilder, I guess, was considered for this part and really, really wanted it. But the producers were adamant that a comic actor not take it because they didn't want it confused with a comedy at all. But then in later interviews, Gene Wilder said that he thought it would have worked much better with a comedian in the role. Can you imagine Gene Wilder in this part?
No, actually, I mean, and maybe it's just my deep, deep fondness for Anthony Hopkins, but I have to agree. I feel like we would have come at it like it was a comedy, and it really wasn't. Burgess Meredith's part, he was kind of funny, but I think overall the main character needs to not be funny.
Oh, yeah, totally agree. And that is number 2 from 1978, Magic, on our list of creepy, horrific dolls. So it takes it up to our number 1, and this is Dave's number 1 as well, proving that great minds indeed think alike, at least for one time on this countdown. And anybody that saw this topic probably thought immediately of this movie, and you're right, it's a single mother giving her son a much sought-after doll for his birthday, only to discover that it is possessed by the soul of a serial killer. From 88, the original Child's Play.
Chucky.
Nobody believes you about Chucky. He came alive in my hand.
Oh, for God's sake.
Why won't you believe me?
Because I'm sane. Mrs. Barkley, sane and rational.
No one believes the truth. Or lives to tell it. There's nothing nice about murder. And there's nothing innocent about Child's Play.
Directed by Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, just a few years after doing Fright Night and bringing back Chris Sarandon. This is such an iconic movie. It was a no-brainer to put it at number 1 for my list, and I was so happy to see that it was number 1 on your list.
Actually, to be honest, number 1 on my personal list is the Homer Simpson Krusty doll from Treehouse of Horror that is based on Child's Play, where he turns around the back and said, "Oh, it was just set to evil."
That's a great honorable mention.
It's a great honorable mention. But yeah, this is probably the standard bearer for creepy dolls. It was certainly the most successful, I think. I mean, it spawned how many? We've had sequels, and then we had the reboot here a few years ago.
Part of it is because the personality grew over time, and kind of in the way that Freddy Krueger's personality grew over time, over successive installments. But Chucky's personality is just so larger than life, and it just suits that creepy doll, like the shock of red hair and the freckles on his face and that terrible bib overall strapey outfit that he's wearing. It's such a funny contrast with the personality that it develops. And really, I sort of feel like we could have picked almost any of the movies in this franchise. If you like the first Child's Play, then I feel like there aren't going to be any in this franchise you don't like to some degree. I mean, they still have his personality driving a lot of what's going on. I mean, the first one is always the one that you go to first. And in this case, I think it's because it takes itself a little bit more seriously, and it's not intentionally funny ever. And it does actually, surprisingly enough, it gets off some decent scares. Part of it is not so much because the doll is scary as it is because there's a child who's in jeopardy the whole time, right? And there's not really anybody helping him because Chris Sarandon is sure that this little boy who is the killer. Right. So it's like the child is in jeopardy in every which way. So you feel bad for the mom because it's like, and then when she finally, which is really a great scene, you know it's coming when the doll just sort of comes to life in her hands. It's the kind of thing that you always wanted to see in Toy Story, and then finally it's mimicked when he finally shows himself to Sid next door. When Sheriff Woody shows himself to Sid next door as being a live doll is an homage to this particular scene. It's really very effective. I mean, for a film that is about an annoying as hell doll who kills people, this one is pretty creepy, and a lot of it is because of Brad Dourif.
Oh yeah, great voice performance. And I also love, it's funny when you said that, it reminded me of the line in the trailer where the voiceover says, "Murder isn't nice." Really? No, it's not fun at all. Yeah, Brad Dourif does a fantastic job. It's one of the things I think that really, as we've talked many times about voice performances, you can't just dial it in. I mean, it's still a performance, and his really is, and it really makes the movie.
It does. I was disappointed in the reboot, and one of the reasons that I thought I would not be was because Mark Hamill was doing the voice of Chucky, and he is a great voice actor. He was the Joker. I know that you love that, Dave. He was the Joker in the animated series and is so great.
He really is, but Brad Dourif just... I think it's almost like Brad Dourif is not acting, like, because he is Chucky, right? He's done Chucky for so many films, and if you take that out of the mix, as we've clearly seen, it kind of changes the whole feel. Mm-hmm. And I know with the remake, that's what they were going for, right? They were updating the movie, definition of a remake. They were trying to make it make sense to the audience today, something we can relate to. But we're talking about Brad Dourif in his prime, literally just a couple of years before he does Exorcist 3. This is a near perfect movie.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the original plot ideas was to have the good guy dolls be lifelike that had blood and latex skin. So if the kids played too rough, they would bleed, and then the kids could go out and buy official good guy bandages. And that led to Andy making a blood brother pact with Chucky and mixing the blood, and that causes him to come alive. That was an early draft.
Who would buy that doll? It would just be such a mess.
Tear his skin and make him bleed. Clean up in the living room. Number 1, Child's Play from 1988 on our list of creepy, horrific dolls. Actually, and we should mention, if we haven't, there's a new creepy killer doll movie out right now.
Yeah, Betty Loves You. We just watched that. We just watched that recently, and it's a plush toy. They say it's a teddy bear, but it's clearly a rabbit, so I'm not sure why they do that, but it's and it's not brilliant, but it was fun. And the way that they have the doll come to life, they just toss it around, and it's got like throwing stars and things like that. It is pretty funny.
And it's better than Spiral. All right, that's our list, our combined list of creepy, horrific dolls. A little bit of Dave's, a little bit of ours, and then they came together to make a good one. Thank you so much, Phantom Dark Dave. What do you got working on right now? What's coming up, and where can we find you?
Well, thank you guys for having me on here. It's been a little bit since I talked to you, so congratulations on surpassing 200 episodes. Bravo.
Oh, thank you.
But if you guys want to see what I'm up to, the best thing to do is just find me on Twitter. My handle is @Dave_Phantom. I am a part of the SIP network, that stands for Slightly Irregular Podcast Network. You can always see where I lend my voice there, and you can just come over and talk movies with us.
All right, fun. Well, just in the last few weeks now, as theaters are getting back open across the country, we got some good news from our home away from home here in Columbus, Ohio. The Gateway Film Center, they are opening again for full operations Memorial Day weekend, and that means we can get back to doing Fright Club Live.
Yeah, there's no confirmed film or podcast topic as of yet, but our hope is to take up our regular slot the second Wednesday of June and have a live broadcast. I'm super excited to do that.
I am too. So that means I guess we're open for topic ideas. And we have gotten all the way almost to the end of this podcast, and I have not even mentioned the Fright Club Podcast Facebook group. So ring the bell, ring the alarm, because I'm mentioning it now. And we're getting actually a lot more members now. It's a lot of fun. So please, if you'd like to be a part of it, we'd love to have you. Just send a request on Facebook. Again, it's Fright Club Podcast group on Facebook. So we'll definitely have more information about that. If you're in the area at all, we'd love to see you back for Fright Club Live at Gateway Film Center. And hopefully, if things go well, we'll just continue as we did with once a month, usually the second Wednesday of every month. A new movie and a new topic and a new podcast. And so it should be fun. So until then, looking forward to hearing from you. If you want to have some ideas on creepy dolls that we missed or anything that we got wrong, we always love to keep your conversation going. You can find us on Twitter. That is @FrightClubPod. Also on Facebook and Instagram, it's Mad Wolf Columbus. And the main website is madwolf.com. So until next time, Dave, thank you again. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And she is Hope Madden.
He's George Wolf.
And this is the Fright Club Podcast. Dave, take us out.
Stay frightful, my friends.